So, all right. So today we have two speakers, and our first speaker is Gilbert Johnson, and he will be leading a just. He's oh my God, he's a lead justice coordinator at Community Coalition. He works at Community Coalition to help transform the social and economic conditions in South LA that foster addiction, crime, violence, and poverty by building a community institution that involves thousands and creating influencing changing public policy. And then our second speaker, who will be leading us in the advocacy skill for the day is Albizael del Valle. Oh, I said it right. He's with the City Council District Number 8. He will be walking us through how to make calls to the police department and to advocate for reform. So we're in to learn a lot today, guys. We have two guest speakers who's doing advocacy work in the community.
So without further ado, Gil, if you'd like to get started, the floor is yours.
Cool. So I always like to start out from a place of gratitude, right? And just thank you all for allowing me to be able to share, talk a little bit about some of our work at Community Coalition, as you know, one of the lead social justice organizations in South Central Los Angeles, to share a little bit about my story and background and my personal connections with racist policing, with the racist criminal and justice system, and how I got to where I'm leading that work at Community Coalition to really, you know, transform and work towards dismantling these systems that have oppressed and caused a lot of harm and trauma and victimization in communities like mine. I am a native of South Central Los Angeles, you know, born and raised. And I think back to like my first experiences with the sheriffs growing up on the west side of South Central. You know, my grandmother, who was one of the first Black women to move into the Hyde Park community, and her negative experiences, and my uncles and aunties, their negative experiences with law enforcement here in Los Angeles, and just leaving the house and her saying, be careful, Robbie, you know, they out to get you, Black man, you know, the police out to get you. And growing up with that, like hearing that and internalizing that. And then, you know, at the age of, I mean, getting pulled over, targeted, you know, just because my grandmother was Black and my uncles were Black, you know, racial profiling, I grew up experiencing that. But it wasn't until I was 14 and one of my neighbors, you know, we went joyriding. We took his grandma's car to the gas station to go get some blunts. And there was an unmarked police car that was sitting in the alley, just monitoring the gas station. And they said we looked young. That's why they got behind us in the first place, because we looked young, like we shouldn't have been out at 10 o'clock at night, which we shouldn't have, but we were kids. We were into mischief. And we just went to go get some blunts because we were smoking. You know, we used to smoke a lot of weed. It's legal now. It wasn't back then, but you know, that's a whole nother conversation around the criminalization of marijuana, right? But basically, we got into a brief high-speed chase. They were in an unmarked car. We didn't know who they were, and they were telling us, and we lived in a community that was gang infested. It was a lot of gang and criminal activity. So, you know, if a car, they're driving behind us with their lights off. So we're thinking it's a drive-by about to happen, like, you know, his granny's car is about to get shot up. So the homie that's driving, he guns it, and we're trying to drive and get back home because we were just a few blocks away, and then the lights come on, and so we realized that they were the police, and it was like, oh damn. And then immediately helicopters came out, so on. It was cars of police everywhere for two 14-year-olds, right, that had just went to the store. We got some candy and some blunts. We were thrown out the car, shotguns to the back of our head, like treated like we had just robbed a bank or killed somebody. And, you know, and that was my first real, like, traumatizing experience with the police. And so I carry that with me every day. You know, I've seen police violence in the jails and outside the jails firsthand, like just horrific stuff, brutal stuff that, should not happen. It just shouldn't happen. And it's not fair, it's unjust. And that's really why I do a lot of the work that I do today to, again, transform those systems. And so I just kind of wanted to open up with a little bit of storytelling, you know, that I ended up getting off from that. But my homie ended up getting locked up because he was driving and, you know, so on and so forth. It's, at 16, I did get locked up and expelled from school for marijuana possession charge. And that was really my first interaction with the criminal justice system here in LA County. And so put on probation, cycled in and out of the system, in and out of incarceration until 2009, which marked the last year I was incarcerated. I was introduced to Community Coalition, and they didn't hold my long background record against me. They didn't hold my criminal background record against me. All of my crimes were drug related, non-violent, you know, non-serious. And, you know, it's organizations like that. That's why organizations like COCO is Community Coalition for short, but, you know, Anti-Recidivism Coalition, Homeboy Industries, The New Way of Life, Timeless, like a lot of the folks that I work with that are providing opportunities and see people as redeemable. If you just invest in people and invest in growth and invest in life and provide the tools and the access that they probably never had growing up, going to schools like Crenshaw High School, one of the poorest education systems, right? Growing up with very little park access. You know, you think about healthy food options, the lack of healthy food options, healthcare. I mean, and you look at communities like South Central, it's so many factors that lead to a lot of the issues in the community. Deep generational poverty, right? Just the unemployment, health disparities, right? Just so many things that we have to deal with that have never really been treated and invested in. And that's why COCO's work, you know, we're a 30-year-old anti-racist social justice organization that was founded by now Congressmember Karen Bass, you know, who's one of the most powerful Black women at the national level. And so, and shout out to my brother Albie, because he works with Maruqeece Harris-Dawson when Karen Bass went on to become the first African-American female speaker of the Assembly here in California. Maruqeece Harris-Dawson took over Community Coalition. And so he ran the organization for 11 years or so, and then went on to become the city councilman of CD8, City Council District 8, which is South Central, which is the area where we focus our work. Like the main scope of our work at COCO is in South Central. And so when you think about strategic political relationships, COCO is pretty well positioned to advance an agenda that's rooted in the people, what the people want. And so we are a community-driven organization. Again, 30 years old, and we were founded in response to the crack cocaine epidemic. Because at that time, you know, families were being torn apart. Instead of treating the drug issue, instead of treating substance abuse and drug abuse, it was criminalized. And that's when we saw like, you know, really prison boom, skyrocket. That's when we saw the militarization of the police take off. And then you think about the laws that led up to that. You know, at COCO, we embrace the ideology, like the personal is political, right? Everything that we're dealing with on a personal level stems from policies and laws that were created intentionally to, you know, to engineer the conditions in our community. And so think about redlining, you know, think about restrictive covenants like deindustrialization, hundreds of thousands of jobs left LA. And then the government brought in crack cocaine to fund a war that we had nothing to deal with, right? You think about the intentionality behind it, and then using law enforcement or law and order as the approach to address mental health issues, to address homelessness, to address poor education, right? And so that was not the approach that we needed to take. COCO and Karen Bass at that time was working to implement a public health model that actually addressed the root causes of the addiction, the crime, the violence, and the historical poverty that many folks growing up in South Central dealt with. So just wanted to give a little background on Community Coalition and our work. And I mean, just to say we're still going 30 years later, still going strong. You know, still have a base of thousands of folks across South Central. We have youth programs that are flourishing and making sure our kids get the help and access to college education and business development. We're working with Maruqeece's organization. It's always been about taking dollars. Like my work as the lead justice organizer is really grounded in taking money out of these, again, racially oppressive systems and redirecting it back towards what the community needs. So, you know, more treatment, more entrepreneurship programs, more healing work. So we're doing a lot of healing circles across LA to, again, address the deep trauma and the pain that, you know, quite frankly, law enforcement has imposed on our communities for decades, generations. And so I'll move away from Coco and kind of get into some of the history of law enforcement, why I'm actually here. But I can never open up without kind of laying some framework or context around Community Coalition and the work that we do as, you know, that community-driven organization that really prioritizes the voices of the community members that are closest to the issues and have been impacted the most by, you know, the system of mass incarceration. And so, as you are, and then we'll get some question and answering later. So please hold any questions. But I'm more of a dialogue type person. Unfortunately, the virtual platform doesn't provide that opportunity to really engage. Like we usually, right now, we be having barbecues and events at parks and tours of our building. We're located right off of 81st in Vermont, but you know, because of the directives of the CDC and the Department of Public Health, we're not able to do that right now. So thank you for bearing with me. I try to, you know, I'll show a video and try to keep a dialogue or create a dialogue. But please, if you have any questions, write them down and save them for towards the end. And so just, you know, getting right into kind of like the history of just policing here in the United States. There's always been a violent history of racial police brutality, you know, and the criminalization of people of color and poor communities. And that has really led to a lot of the deep mistrust between the communities that the police are supposed to protect and serve, right? And so when I talk about, like, my grandma had given me that message every day leaving the home, like, where did that come from? You know, it's a deep rooted issue that many Black folks, brown folks, indigenous folks have dealt with for a very long time. And so at COCO, we also, you know, we embrace another term of like looking back to look forward, right? And looking back to see what happened, how did this happen, why did this happen, so we can move forward in a more strategic way. Community Coalition, we were founded on the premise of community organizing, which is really about, you know, building the grassroots leadership of everyday residents across the community to, you know, create policy, to change policy again. And so in doing so, we always have to look at how, you know, the racist laws, you know, created a lot of what is going on. And so when you think about, you know, schools in historically poor communities are underperforming, why there's liquor stores on every corner, smoke shops and marijuana dispensaries now that usually aren't owned by people from our community that look like us, you know, and why police presence is so heavy in certain zip codes and not others. And, you know, even life expectancy rates are lower in certain communities and not others. It was all by design. And so thinking back to way back from the anti-immigrant bashing of early police forces to like what became strike breaking when people were rising up and you know, calling for equal rights and better wages, strike breaking in the 1800s, to like the massive corruption of the early 20th century. When you think like the 1980s, it was really like the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and then the 2000s, where, you know, we just saw so much criminality within police or law enforcement agencies, right? Where they were acting like gangs, planting evidence on folks, I remember homies getting picked up in one community, and because they were from a certain gang, the police would drop them off in another community so they could get beat up or killed, right? Falsifying reports and documents, and just the specific targeting of Black, brown, and other people of color to fill quotas rather than really protect and serve the community. It's an issue. It's an issue that it's a long-standing issue in communities like mine, which is one of the communities that was hit hardest by the system of mass incarceration, community in South Central. And so, the role of police in the United States has really been defined by economics and politics and political agendas, and not really about crime or crime control. And you think about the origins of policing in the US and how it's rooted really in efforts to protect white wealthy property and land. You think about white settler colonialism that the colonizers brought to the Americas, right? And the genocide, and it was all in an effort to establish white male dominance, right? And that was really like kind of the one of the core functions of the earlier police, and just trying to create social control, right? And so it wasn't really about safety of those who were already here, those who needed needed assistance, needed support, needed opportunities, but weren't met with that, or met with the over-reliance on law enforcement. And so to go back to just like the early models of policing, it was really founded or kind of taken from models of policing in England and brought here. And so in the North, and you talk about like the 1600s, policing really relied on like volunteers, citizens just volunteering their time that wasn't paid, they weren't paid, and they were called like watch groups. And then it kind of went into constables, which, the watch group style of policing was just folks, it was like night watch. And so I think they have a show on Netflix or something that kind of alludes to it, but literally just everyday folks kind of it was community policing. It was like real community policing, right? And then that kind of transformed to the constable system where, they became official law enforcement officers, and, police started getting paid, and they were serving warrants. They were, conveying land and measuring land. But it wasn't until really around the 1830s that the idea of like a centralized municipal police department, police force, really emerged in the United States. And so this was really in the northern part of the US, but we all should know that policing looked very different in southern states where, police were really derived from slave patrols, right? And it really had three functions, which was to chase down, apprehend, and return runaway slaves to their owners. And so it was really to provide a form of like organized terror to deter slave revolts, and to maintain a form of discipline for slave workers who were subject to summary justice, right? And what summary justice means, or it's a system in criminal law that punishes offenders in like a very fast way, like an informal manner. It's expedient manner. There's no court hearing or jury trial. There's really no justice. And so also thinking about vigilantism, and it's also referred to as summary justice, which was, lynching, the formation of the posse, and assassinations of people that tried to have a voice. You think back to the Deep South and chattel slavery being the worst form of slavery in the history of the world, right? On so many levels, and think about the capital and wealth that was built, the generational wealth that was built off the backs of enslaved Africans. Of course, folks are going to do anything they can to uphold that system. And so you have the Civil War, you have Jim Crow, you have Black codes, and all these different laws you know, where it basically makes the criminalization of, you know, non-white folks in many ways legal, right? And so we always say like, oh, this is illegal, this is legal. Well, remember, slavery was legal. You know, lynching was allowed. Police would turn their backs. They wouldn't do anything when, you know, yeah. So I'm not gonna go into like the you know, slavery and that history, but definitely do research and identify the connections between enslavement and policing, and how, you know, following the Civil War, all those vigilante style organizations just evolved into modern Southern police departments, right? Those folks that were standing around looking at you know, brothers and sisters being lynched as a spectacle, as like a picnic, right? Like a fun community event. All they did is become police officials, sheriffs, politicians, educators, right? It grew up with that. And so that's kind of really what it evolved into, again, as a means of controlling free slaves who are now laborers working in the agricultural caste system. So, you know, also enforcing Jim Crow segregation, which was designed to deny freed slaves equal rights and access to the political system. So that's really kind of like the rudiments of policing in the South. And we see that even today, how, you know, we think about like last year, an article came out, 2019, Black people being pulled over here in the city of Los Angeles at 5 times the rate of their population, disproportionately, right? And even though Black folks are being pulled over at ridiculously high rates, and racial profiling or stop and frisk is supposed to be illegal, you know, they found contraband on white folks, more contraband on white folks than they did Black and brown folks. And so contraband, like, you know, open bottles, drugs, weapons, so on and so forth. And so this is actual data that was able to be pulled from police data, right? And so still to this day, we see a lot of that social control. You think about LA County having the largest jail system in the world, right? And though Black people only make up 8% of the population here in the county, making up close to 40% of the population in LA County Jail, right? You think about Supervisorial District 2, where I live, you know, still currently, I'm based in South Central LA, and how a third of the entire population in prison across the state of California comes from that district, right? It's crazy when you think about the social and economic conditions, and all the systems at play, foster care, DCFS, right? All these systems at work. And, you know, it really can be tied back to slavery in many ways. And, you know, again, social control. And so, you know, thinking about the Texas Rangers, how they were created as a quasi-official, you know, kind of group of vigilantes that also were focused on suppressing Mexican Americans and Latinx folks. You think about the Zoot Suit riots, and back in the 20s, when there was a huge migration of Black folks from the South looking for the American dream and the opportunity towards access, folks coming to the West Coast, and being met by staunch racism, right? Both at the hands of the community and the police, right? So you think about the Watts Rebellion in 1965, where Marquette Frye was criminalized and targeted by the police. A lot of folks don't even know that the first gangs here in LA were actually created to fight off the racist police and the racist white gangs that would come to the Black community and terrorize the Black community. You know, some of us may have heard about sundown towns, where you bet not be caught in Torrance if you're Black, right? Once the sun goes down, because, you know, you will be met with violence and possibly even death. And so, again, a lot of this activity was allowed at the hands of police. And we all know Rodney King, right? The 1992 uprising. And so, I mean, Latasha Harlins, I mean, so many instances throughout history that we're still seeing to this day. And so when we think about abolition of the police, I do have a video I'm gonna share. So I'll go ahead and pull up my screen because I'm gonna shut up for a second. I wanna stop talking so much, but I had this visual right here, but oh, our mantra at Coco is people, power, progress. So again, getting back to like community organizing, we believe that when we bring the people together, provide the vehicle and the tools, again, to create the leadership that we need, that's how we build the grassroots progress to win and to create the progress, the grassroots power to create the progress that we need, right? And so a lot of our work, you know, we led the movement to pass Proposition 47 here in Southern California, which reclassified 6 nonviolent felonies to misdemeanors, right? Hundreds, thousands of people getting out of prison who were in there for crimes of poverty, right? Again, so we think about the criminalization of poverty, the war on drugs, and, you know, many people were sitting in jail and still languishing in jail because, you know, they stole a pack of diapers. Like literally 3 strikes law allows someone to get a life sentence because they stole a piece of pizza. Like that actually happened. And so again, always keeping in mind laws, that context is important, and how if it was the laws that created these conditions, then we have to pass laws and policies to undo a lot of those harms, right? And so that's really why our work is grounded in the laws. And so, you know, I kind of talked about some of this, but just to make it like kind of visual. And when you look at again the history of slave patrols and the Fugitive Slave Act, you know, and then police tactics to this day, you could see many parallels, like how, you know, when they visited and searched slave quarters, it was a form of stop and frisk, right? Policies that we're still seeing. You know, meeting quotas, when we think about, you know, punishment, and then you think about extrajudicial killings of Black men and women, where law enforcement gets to do that with impunity, right, and get away with it, right, and historically, and we're still seeing it to this day. You know, you can see that, and there's a link down here if you wanted to look more into it, but being able to draw those parallels is important as well. And so all of it just kind of morphed into this, okay, why isn't that, into a different system. And one of the key reasons why, you know, law enforcement officials get to do what they do and get away again with impunity is because of the Police Bill of Rights. And there is work currently happening to amend it, right? It's going to take a constitutional amendment across the state. But if you've ever heard about that blue wall of silence, you know, a lot of that is because, or blue wall of protection, like we protect our own, the police, right? And if you speak up against some type of injustice that you experience, you're considered a rat, you're criminalized. You think about the gang activity, the banditos within the sheriff's department, it coming out. Like I've seen the gangs and the tattoos inside county jail. And you know, it's like truly a gang culture. And when you think about culture, the culture is what's so important, because we can try to reform this and, oh, they need better training and better hiring practices. And yes, those incremental improvements help. The culture is still there. And so I know folks that went into the police force with the greatest intent of, you know, save the world and fight crime. And, you know, I know the people and you get tainted because of the culture. And so this Bill of Rights really influences a lot of that culture. And again, the laws, the policies, when we're able to change and chip away at those laws and policies, then that's how we believe, that's the road to abolition. A lot of people, yeah, well, so I have a video that speaks more to why we yell defund the police, right? And how that's not really ridiculously um, a ridiculous term, right? A lot of people say defund the police. What do you mean? And so I have a video that kind of speaks to that. And so this is just one of the things that we're going to be working on, throwing down on the Police Bill of Rights. So definitely, you know, there's a bunch of coalition of organizations that are working on this project. There's a lot of work happening at the county level with the sheriffs, as well as the city level on, you know, with LAPD, because, you know, LAPD is a function of city government and the sheriffs is a function of county government. And so important to watch the Police Bill of Rights, because that does it provides a ridiculous amount of protections to officers. And that's why, you know, some of you may have seen the numbers. We have 622 murders here in LA County, and only one of the cops was prosecuted, right? A lot of that falls on the district attorney. So that's a very important race to watch as well. And so because I'm representing Coco right now, I can't really share my thoughts on that, but I'll drop a link where you can see our action fund ballot guide, and it lays out who we need in that district attorney seat and why we need to really help bring justice to communities of color. And so Push LA, I mentioned that a little bit. I also dropped this link in the chat so you can look at some of our current work, because a lot of our work right now is grounded in creating alternatives to policing. So like, how do we invest into communities to build up or to elevate the strengths and the you know, the resiliency and the wisdom in the community to create safety, right? So I work with a lot of gang interventionists, right? And they're putting their lives on the line, reducing conflict every day, stopping retaliation every day, showing up and supporting families that have lost their loved ones, either at the hands of, you know, state-sanctioned violence, police violence, or community violence, right? Like, and they've been doing that with very little resources, like little to no funding. We're just starting to see some menial increases, but a lot of them are doing this peace building work, showing the youth, like, you don't have to do what I did. I have a lot of those conversations as being a former gang member and formerly incarcerated, homeless, drug addict, all of that. I'm able to connect with a lot of our youth at Community Coalition and help show them another way, right? But instead of trying to increase the police presence in our community, how about we increase the impact that folks are having on the ground day to day, that are not showing up to a scene to shoot someone or lock someone up or, you know, incarcerate, hook and book, right? But it's actually showing up from a place of love and understanding. Like, I've been there. I know what you're feeling right now. You know, I've lost so many loved ones. And so being able to connect, build relationships, right? That's really what a lot of our work is grounded in right now. We're seeing a lot of movement around the alternatives to, because there's alternatives to policing, again, on the city side, and then there's alternatives to sheriffs and law enforcement on the county side. So there's work being done from both ends to really create or what we call reimagine public safety, right? Public safety has meant police, jails, prisons for far too long. You think about, since the 80s, California has spent $1 trillion building up its public safety infrastructure. Well, what about the safety net infrastructure? What about, you know, again, bringing in what the community really needs to help the community grow and elevate and excel and succeed, right? And so that's really where a lot of our work is centered right now. Also, there's so definitely go to this website. You can learn more about that. You know, there's a motion right now to, okay, let me go to this. There's another motion right now that's focused on removing LAPD from traffic stops. And City Councilman Maruqeece Harris-Dawson.
On June 5th, the Washington, D.C.
a big player in that. And so, you know, the Push LA Coalition will be leading a lot of that work. So I say all that because it's a lot of ways to get involved, and it's a lot of ways to help move the needle, and we can't do that without the people, without the everyday voices of folks that have been impacted by these issues. I haven't checked the chat. How am I doing on time? Because this video is 10 minutes, but I can, you know, shorten it if need be.
I would say try to wrap up by 1-ish, if that's all right, and then we can move on to the Q&A.
Gotcha.
Great.
So I'll just show this video because it really lays out.
D.C. mayor unveiled a statement painted down the street leading to the White House. Black Lives Matter. Within 24 hours, Black Lives Matter activists responded with their own message: defund the police. This slogan caught on rapidly among tens of thousands of people protesting police brutality in the United States. But what does it really mean to defund the police? And what if it's not as radical as it sounds?
A city budget, a county budget, a state budget, and a national budget are all markers of what our societies are prioritizing.
The U.S. spends $100 billion every year on policing, most of which comes from local municipalities. New York City, for example, appropriated $5.9 billion last year to the police department. For comparison, here's what the city allocated for homeless services, health, housing, youth and community development, and jobs programs. The disparities are huge, and they echo in cities across the country. Like in Chicago, where the policing budget is $1.7 billion, roughly twice the budget of the fire department, Department of Transportation, public library, and public health combined.
If you look at these budgets in the United States, what you'll see is that we have deeply deprioritized providing people their basic needs, and instead we've over-prioritized punishing human beings.
The emphasis on policing in the U.S. has led to over-policing and under-policing all at once. The police arrest over 10 million people in a year, and the vast majority of those arrests, especially in Black and poor neighborhoods, are for minor offenses like drug possession or drinking in public. That heavy-handed approach is over-policing. But when it comes to violent crime, the rate of police arrests is incredibly low, and that's under-policing, which leaves communities of color underserved.
People believe that the police are deterring violence. Clearly they're enacting violence, but are they also deterring violence? And that's highly questionable. A lot of research suggests that they are having no influence whatsoever. So if they're having no influence whatsoever on the phenomena that they're supposed to be influencing, and they're doing violence, what purpose are they supposed to serve?
The repercussions of prioritizing the police over other services can also be seen at schools in the U.S. 1.7 million students are in schools with police, but no counselors, and 3 million have police in schools, but no nurses. And when it comes to 911 calls, in many cases, police officers are the first responders to mental health-related emergencies. That's important because 1 in every 4 deaths from police shootings are people with mental health problems.
I can literally imagine you just replace someone with a weapon, someone who will actually sit down on the ground with them and talk, not throw them on the ground and sit on top of them or lay on top of them, but someone who will take them wherever they are, listen to their situations, and then try to figure out, diagnose their problem.
Police are doing the jobs of what other groups of people and workers can be doing.
Being tasked with jobs they're not trained to do is an idea some police officers acknowledge too.
Every societal failure, we put it off on the cops to solve. Not enough mental health funding. Let the cop handle it. Not enough drug addiction funding. Let's give it to the cops. Schools fail. Give it to the cops. Policing was never meant to solve all those problems.
There is a big fundraising deadline coming up for Senate Democrats across the country, and they need your help right now.
The need to rethink police budgets has become even more glaring in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. Many have called attention to the fact that hospital workers struggle to get personal protective equipment, while thousands of police officers have riot gear at the ready for protests. Even in response to the pandemic, while many agencies grapple with coronavirus budget cuts, police budgets have largely remained intact. New York City's proposal for the coming fiscal year cuts just 5% of the NYPD budget. But that same proposal calls for a 12% cut to the Department of Health. This is where the movement to defund the police comes in. It's a push to take the billions of dollars cities spend on police and move that funding to other services, like housing, jobs, or mental health care. At its core, the idea is to rethink public safety, because the current form of policing isn't built to serve everyone equally.
We live in an economy of punishment. We, as in Black people, as in poor people, as in marginal people, police are not used to keep us safe. What we've seen over the last 7 years is Black people being killed, humiliated, violated, sexually assaulted, maimed by law enforcement. And we haven't seen it get any better. Reimagining public safety in this moment is a matter of life or death.
For years, reforms like introducing police body cameras have been proposed across the country as a response to police brutality. But these reforms have only added more money to police budgets, even when, as studies like this one in DC show, they have no detectable effect on police use of force.
We absolutely need to try and hold law enforcement accountable. But what we recognized is all of our accountability measures up until now have not worked.
In the case of Minneapolis, since 2016, their police officers have received body cameras, bias training, and have a duty to intervene policy where other police officers must step in if they see force applied in a.
So it is 1 o'clock, and it just I'll share the link to this video as well, because it does go a little bit more in depth about budgets and again why it's important that we are defunding the police and creating a different vision for safety. But it's 1 o'clock, so I do want to respect everyone's time. I also share our ballot guide. I'm sure there's so many of them floating around, but this is the one that Community Coalition members actually created and worked on. And so I'll share that. And then before we get into Q&A, immediately sing up. That should be sign up, but let's sing too. We gotta sing and find joy every opportunity we get, but definitely visit our website, cocosouthla.org, just to learn more about the work we're doing through civic engagement, through building our future leaders, our youth work. Community Coalition is giving out hundreds of thousands of dollars in mutual aid to many folks that are facing eviction, that couldn't get groceries and couldn't pay their rent, and so many issues right now that have been heightened due to COVID, and giving out hundreds of laptops to youth that to help with the technological divide. And so Wi-Fi spots, thousands of PPE to community-based organizations. I guess a lot that we're doing to help uplift our community right now. And again, big shout out to CD8 Maruqeece Harris-Dawson, because his leadership, his staff, they've really been doing a lot as well. Free senior meal programs and consistent food drive-throughs, like you name it. We're out there trying to meet the needs of our people, but it's only so much we can do, and it's really a Band-Aid solution. So again, thinking about organizing as opposed to just activism, we're thinking long-term, right? Like these Band-Aid solutions are helping. Remember, we got videos of members crying and being so thankful of what Coco has been able to do, but it only goes so far. So until, again, we address really the systemic issues you know, long term through policy, and we get Measure J passed, right? We stop no on Prop 20. You know, the ATI, alternatives to incarceration. Like, there's just so much work that we're connected with, involved with, and leading. You know, got to get involved. If it's not with COCO, definitely with another organization that's on the ground. But if you know folks in South Central, I definitely encourage you to get involved with COCO. I mean, every day during the week, Monday through Friday, we have volunteer opportunities where we're calling to educate the community on different propositions. So that's from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. every evening. And that's, you know, COCO staff, COCO members, volunteers, right? Everyone is welcome to participate in that. Every Saturday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. we have Solidarity Saturdays, where we're doing phone calls, and we're also going to be harvesting, so picking up like elder members or members that may not have transportation. We'll be actually picking up their documents, signing the form, and delivering it to the voting locations, even taking it to Norwalk. And so, again, you know, there's a lot of voter suppression happening, and our work is really to lift the voice of the people. So one of the best ways to do that is through our vote. So, you know, yes on 17, because we have to give our formerly incarcerated brothers and sisters that democratic civil right to be involved with the democracy. So Saturday, and then every Sunday, we're doing solidarity walks. Today is in Long Beach, but next Sunday is going to be in East LA, and then the following Sunday is going to be in South Los Angeles. So if you want to get out there, get some exercise, talk to folks face to face, we'll have masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, train. Everything is training, because we're not putting folks into a position where you don't know what you're talking about, right? So that political ed is definitely involved. And so again, I just want to kind of briefly walk through this, because there's so many ways to get involved. At South LA Cafe, COCO also holds weekly ballot watches from 6 to 8. So that's where we go through the propositions in detail, and that's led by our members. Again, organizing, elevating leadership. And so I can provide the links and flyers for all of this stuff that I'm talking about in the chat. And then next Friday, if you just want to learn more about Community Coalition specifically, then you could definitely join us at the People's First Assembly, which is a space for newer community members to you know, learn more about the history, but also our current work and campaigns to transform the social and economic conditions. And there you have my contact information as well. So please feel free to reach out to me directly. And yeah, I'll go ahead and end with that, and just much appreciation for all of you all's leadership and volunteerism and the work that you're involved with. And hopefully this was helpful. Thank you. Oh,
thank you.
If we have time.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you so much, and that we have about 10 minutes for questions. So if you have any questions for Gil, please feel free to ask them, or you can put them in the chat if you prefer.
And if not, that's cool too, you know. It's all good with me.
I got one, Gilbert. I'll ask. So my name is Nisha, and my question to you is, what do we do about the like the policing that was like they hold on one second. Okay. Where we like where they have like the system where it's like a certain community that had been targeted by policing already. Because I watched a video where it was talking about they have a technology system where a certain community, it's like I won't say redlining, but it's more like, you know, a certain community that's been targeted already by policing. So it's like a numbers game basically. Can you explain what I'm talking about?
Like the algorithms, like so there's algorithms.
Yeah, there we go. That. Yeah.
To predict where crime is going to happen, and historically we've seen police use these numbers and these systems that are inherently racially biased, right? That basically informs how they're going to dispatch officers. So, you know, Tuesdays and Thursdays, we already know. I live off of 83rd and Hoover. So on those days, it's just police everywhere, right? And so it's because they're supposed to be identifying spikes in crime, or not identifying, but in the effort to prevent crime, then they'll send out a huge amount of officers, right? And Albie could probably, because, you know, CD8 does a lot more work with police directly. And so Albie could probably speak to that even better than me. But yes, they use these systems to basically inform how they're going to dispatch law enforcement. Like one example, 2 weeks ago, South LA went on tactical alert because there was a spike in shootings. Right, it was a lot of shootings happening. I mean, helicopters over my home every day, police everywhere, can't get into my apartment. And so they went on tactical alert, which meant, okay, these areas which are like crime hotspots, boom, we're going to send in Metro, and the metropolitan arm of the police is the militarized arm. So they show up with military grade weapons. They have rocket launchers, tanks, drones, grenades. Like, it's crazy the amount of money that goes into, you know, their weaponry and what they show up with. And many times they're getting called, you know, like the videos, they're getting called for someone having a mental health episode, or there's a case of domestic violence, right? And yeah, so that's where like the alternatives piece come in. It's like, they shouldn't be showing up with military grade weapons, you know? And so, yeah, that's just one example of what you lifted, but it's important. That's one thing. Those algorithms are very problematic. That's like with Proposition 25, they want to bring risk assessments into the courtroom, which risk assessments already exist. But yeah, those are very problematic, very problematic.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So yes, I see Kelly has a question. So, you know, I lifted one of the most significant methods of crime reduction I've seen in my 36 years living here in South Central, and even across the nation, like Newark, Chicago, you know, Washington. There's community-driven efforts to reduce crime and violence, and so gang intervention and prevention is one of the most significant ways. And community coalition, you know, I think I mentioned earlier, we're the fiscal sponsor for the South LA Community Safety Initiative, which was a pilot program that started last year, that Maruqeece Harris-Dawson's office championed, and Coco was very much involved with that, because what we did, again, I mentioned the healing circles, but they're trauma-informed healing circles that were happening in every hood, like almost every neighborhood with a gang population. We were having healing circles last year at parks, at schools, at community-based organizations. And we actually saw an 8% reduction in violent crime last year. Unfortunately, this year, COVID happened. And a lot of the programs that we usually have in place, the summer night lights, the parks after darks, the youth job training programs, and a lot of that has been shut down. And so we attribute the increases in crime to that lack of infrastructure, right? Being able to provide career opportunities, being able to, you know, go to the park and eat. And, you know, I mentioned barbecues. Like, there's all these different techniques that we've used to bring people together, to build community. Like, that's a big function of community coalition. We have mass-based events that we do where we bring folks from every background, different gangs together, peace building efforts. You know, some of the folks that are leading the South LA Community Safety Initiative are gang members, you know, or former gang members. They've been incarcerated. Most of them are, like someone I work closely with, LaTanya Ward, after Nipsey was killed last year, she organized a huge gang march and truce between gangs that would never come to the table and talk to each other. I mean, sworn enemies, arch enemies, right? And so like that, and then we saw crime decrease, right? And so being able to create spaces like that is critical. You know, truth, when you think about gang truces like the truce in 1992 and how that led to historic low rates in crime and violence, right? It's been proven to work. What didn't, there were no investments into that strategy or into that work to make it sustainable. And so again, that's where the investment piece, the justice reinvestment, and how do we take money, you saw it in the video, take money out of these suppressive uh, um, regimes or models and fund the folks that are on the ground doing the work, you know? And so alternatives to policing, like there's mental health teams, right? There, how do we train up our people to become everyday residents, you know, to become mental health experts? How do we build community-based neighborhood watches on different corners where the community, you know, we do block clubs and we make sure different blocks are communicating with each other. And it's like when you know someone and you have that relationship, you're able to reach that person, right? Like, how do we invest in community-based alternatives to policing when we're facing a budget deficit in the county, right? Like, how we do that is through policy. So again, Measure J, and any policies that are going to redirect funding into the community, but you know, increasing the capacity within the community to be able to respond to nonviolent, you know, non-serious, non-emergency crimes is really important. And so we know there's folks that have been doing this work for decades, but again, with little to no resources. And so just imagine the 8% crime reduction we saw last year. Imagine if we invested millions of dollars into that and expanding that and increasing that, right? And that was just a summer pilot program, right? Imagine if we made that sustainable. And you know, so it's really about thinking outside of what we've been taught or conditioned to know. And that's where the reimagine piece comes in. But there are very viable people in the community that can lead this work and have a huge impact on reducing crime and violence. So hopefully that answered your question about gangs. But the gang intervention and the police, even the sheriffs and the police, when they do their press briefs and everything, they talk about just how effective gang prevention and intervention is. If you've seen it, they always attribute great success to the interventionists, but we haven't seen any increases in their budgets, right? They're not unionized. They don't have medical benefits, right? Like, that's what, like, how do we fund intervention work, violence disruption work, but also provide the same benefits that the police officers get, pensions, you know, like, right? If they're out there doing the work, then it should be funded properly and it should receive the same amount of resources and benefits, but we're not seeing that, right? So we definitely have a long way to go on that piece, but cool. I think we'll take one more question if anybody has one. And again, if you want to learn more about any of this, I'm free to talk. If you want to meet some of the interventionists, you know, we're doing all kinds of work at COCO to beef up community services, community-based treatment. And so we'd love to talk further.
I have a question. Do you work with any Latino community organizations as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. I've done quite a bit of work with Homies Unidos. My guy Alex Sanchez. We're more like based in East LA, but they've also been building relationships. There's a black brown. I'm blanking on the name, but it's a black brown coalition that was formed this year. And so yeah, Homie Unidos. My folks over in Watts, the Reverence Project, like, it's a black-led organization, but they do a lot of work with Latinx communities. I mean, Community Coalition was founded on building Black and Brown unity, because that's who at the time was making up the largest populations in South Central at the height of the crack cocaine epidemic, and we were experiencing a lot of the same issues and conditions. So when we think about civic power, getting our people on the same page is very important. But yeah, I mean, Homeboys Industries, a lot of the organizations are mixed. So it's not like just, you know, like our president, current president is a Latinx male, but he'll tell you like straight up, the liberation of Black folks leads to the liberation of everyone. And so like we get it. So we do deep solidarity work. And we, you know, that's so important to the movement. Yes, so yes. There's some other organizations, I'm blanking on some names, but absolutely we work with, oh, Churla. They're a part of Push LA Coalition, Push LA, People's Budget LA, the Trans Latinx Coalition, Bambi, like, yeah, so absolutely. It's a lot of collaboration happening. And it's needed, and it's, yeah, so cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, so y'all have my number, y'all have my email, reach out to me during the week. I have a wife and 5 babies, so I try to keep my weekend sacred, but during the week, definitely hit me up. And again, much appreciation to you all. I look forward to seeing y'all at some of those solidarity days and getting involved. And thank you again. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Gil. Let's all give him a big round of applause, virtually or not. That was excellent. Thank you so much. I learned a ton, and I would love to pass the mic along to Albie now, who is going to be leading us in our advocacy skill for the day.
So thank you all for having me. Thank you for connecting with our office. I really appreciate Gil's knowledge when it comes to just being so grounded and connected to the community and understanding really the context, the historical context behind the reality that we're living in. So if you heard it and you paid attention to what Gilbert was saying, he probably has a PhD on community policing and policing in general. So I'm really appreciative. And so when you all reached out to me, it felt to me that it was necessary to have that aspect in order to have a balanced conversation about policing. So, that's the first thing when Marisa and Denise reached out to me. I wanted to make sure that we had the community's perspective, and that's what I think being in a political office is really all about. Right? So you need to be listening closely to what the community members are telling you, because they have lived this more than you at a different capacity, at a different level. So having that perspective every day, every week in our office is essential. We need to be listening closely to what community members are saying, because most of the time they know more than you. So I really appreciate, that perspective. Of course, Gilbert is a legend himself. And in order to continue that, in order to be, I think, at that level, there needs to be a lot of prep work that needs to happen within yourself as an individual, but also as a community. So that's what I want to talk about now, is sort of the practical steps that you can take in order to bring about change, in order to speak to power effectively, and get involved really as much as possible. So I want to first go over the context, the political context of what's going on in Los Angeles, right? So Congressmember Karen Bass, who founded Community Coalition, she introduced a bill called the George Floyd Justice and Policing Bill, which is 7120 House of Representative bill, and it passed in the House, and it's still waiting for it to go through Senate. But that's a huge victory, and I think it speaks to the moment, it speaks to what we need in this country. And I think as a country, we need to address policing. But at the same time, we need to understand that each police department is very different. So I do believe that as local municipalities, we need to be connected to what is happening within our local police departments, because there might be loopholes in your police department that, let's say in LAPD, that might not exist in another police department, or vice versa. So having a national conversation is important, but really focusing also on your local police department is key, in understanding how they function and understanding what are some of their shortfalls. I think as a council, in LA City Council, we have worked on responding to the demands of the people. And like I mentioned earlier, we've sat down with many different groups, many different organizations, and people who are experts at this. And we've pushed forward legislation in our local city, right, the city of Los Angeles, to bring about change and to bring about a different approach to policing. And one of those just happened like 4 days ago, 3-4 days ago, which is the creation or planning to create an unarmed crisis response team. So a lot of every situation really where somebody ends up getting shot or it's involved in a police involved shooting unjustly, obviously there is somebody with a gun and somebody who doesn't have a gun. So we want to figure out ways, I think, as a city, of how do we reduce those interactions where we have unarmed folks that can respond to a crisis. And something very simple as, let's say somebody is in front of your house and they've decided to live right in front of your driveway. And that is, that's where they decided to live. They're setting up their tent in front of your driveway. You can't get in or out. Who do you call? Right? We're trained to say, all right, we have to call the police. So we're bringing an armed police officer who should probably be doing something else to address this issue where somebody either has a drug abuse problem or a mental health issue, and then we're forcing that interaction. So we want to figure out, how do we prevent an unhealthy interaction like that? Why don't we bring a mental health expert or somebody that has an expertise in housing or resources that can help that individual, instead of the previous option, which was to bring somebody that's armed to address the issue. The other thing that we have been working on is, when it comes to actual policing, is to create what we call the Community Safety Partnership Program. And Community Safety Partnership is really a partnership that's created between community members, stakeholders, and the police. So one example that we had was at Harbor Park, Jackie Tatum Harbor Park. It's one of our parks in our area. And we had a large number of violent crimes. And it seemed like there was no stopping it. There were several homicides in a short time frame. And we pursued this partnership between community members, gang interventionists, churches, stakeholders, and the police departments. And it wasn't the prettiest picture at first. There were a lot of conversations, a lot of disagreements, but it's really an investment that you have to make as a community and you have to make as a political office to address an issue. And we have seen a reduction of crime. It's over 90% where crime has been reduced to. Almost 100% of violent crimes have not happened in the last 4 years since the inception of the program. So that is a different way also to approach policing. When you're walking around with one of the officers that's within that program, every neighbor knows their name. Every gang interventionist knows their name, and they have a good relationship with them. So this is another approach that we have taken as a city. And we have recently created a community safety partnership bureau that's going to focus in continuing these types of programs throughout the city in order to establish a different culture for policing, a different approach to policing in the area. And Gilbert mentioned this earlier, but we also created a program for safe passage. There's a lot of healing circles. We know that if you have ever been in a moment where you have witnessed a crime, a violent crime, is very traumatic for anybody at any age. And in our communities, we don't necessarily have access to mental health. We don't necessarily have access to therapists. And we have each other. And we've created these spaces so that we can address our trauma together. We can address the things that we have seen together. So we've created these healing circles, and we've revamped our program to have a higher number of gang interventionists in our parks, in our schools, and just being there for the community. And the last thing I want to mention for this part is the importance really of just being involved when it comes to just policing in general. So I've just mentioned some of the initiatives that we have started, but currently, as we stand today, there's been a spike and increase in crime. And there's always this need to want to increase funding for LAPD. And sometimes, we feel like it's more important to really get at the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is something that sometimes cannot be solved by force. So yes, funding LAPD at a certain extent is important, but also, like Gilbert mentioned earlier, what are other organizations doing? What are the other resources that we need to bring to the community to address the root of the problem? If somebody is stealing or just committing crimes because of need, the real problem there is the lack of resources that people have. When you live in South LA, and I live here, it's tough. It's actually tough. You have rarely any jobs in the area, rarely any great food options. You're back and forth dealing with folks that don't have access to resources. So how do we invest in our communities again so that we can have the amount of resources that other communities have? And how do we envision our communities so that we can make it more sustainable for ourselves by ourselves, right? So it's a community for us and by us. And that's really what we're trying to reach. That's really why we want to invest in our communities and not just invest in policing. So we want to invest in communities as well as in policing, right? And there should be a balance in that. So I want to get to the meat really of my speaking part, which is how do we engage with these folks? And I speak for my office. That's why I'm here, and we work closely with LAPD as we work with every other department in the city. And we have good relationship with folks in LAPD, with captains, commanders, sergeants, and SLOs. And I think one of the most important things that we have to do when it comes to policing is really just keeping or really anything in the city, is keeping government accountable and keeping the folks accountable in any department, but in policing as well. And these conversations need to be ongoing. And something that I see that older folks in South LA are very effective at is really speaking to power and speaking to the police department. I feel like older folks in our community are effective at making sure that the police knows how they can do a better job. And it is our part now to really follow those steps and speak to power in the same way. So I know that you all want to know how to go about that and do that effectively. So in the Los Angeles Police Department, the way that it's set up by the city charter, the police commissioners are the lead of the department. They lead the department, and they have a meeting every Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. Right? So if you're at a store and you don't like your service, you speak to the manager. So if you don't like the service you're getting from the police department, you speak to the police commissioners. And in those meetings, those are public meetings, and you can always speak in public comment. And I've seen commissioners interact with folks in the public and connecting them to the right person that will address their issue, right? But if you are organizing yourselves to speak on an item or speak on a I'm sorry. Okay, got you. To speak on an item or speak on a subject that you want to address, you can write a letter to the police commissioners and work on that as a group. And once and there's five commissioners, and you can address all of them within your letter. And that will be you speaking directly to the folks that drive and lead the department. These are all civilians. They're not police officers. And technically, the police chief reports to the commissioners. So it's imperative that you all know who you are asking and why you're asking them, right? So if you want to see change and you know that you're not getting the services that you need to get, you have to speak to the right person. So these are the decision makers for the police department. You want to make change, you speak to the decision makers. Now, at a lower level, so you're in your neighborhood and you're seeing things that you don't like. It could be anything. It could be harassment of a homeless individual, or it could be anything. And you want to address that issue specifically to your community. Or if you all want to organize around an issue that is specific to an area, each police department has a community engagement team, right? And they're called the senior lead officers. The senior lead officers are led by a sergeant, and that sergeant reports to the captain of that police division. In our area, we have 3 police divisions. In Council District 8, we have Southwest Division, 77th Division, and Southeast Division. Those 3, there's 2 captains per police division and 1 sergeant per community engagement office. Now these lows are, and I'm gonna share my screen if I can. Let's see. This is an example of what the maps look like, right? So they're divided by area. And you have 1 officer that focuses on that area, and they work on quality of life issues, but also they work with churches, community stakeholders, and community groups. So if you have any concerns or issues that you want to bring up to that police department, you can go through this senior lead officer, and that senior lead officer is the liaison between the community and the police department division. So you can work with any one of these folks. They have their phone numbers, they're public, and emails are usually their badge number at lapd.online. So we work with these folks on quality of life issues, but beyond that, you can also work with them on some of the concerns that you want to share with folks. So that is one of the maps right there. Something that I have seen that is pretty effective is writing letters or contacting the captain of that particular division as well. So you can contact the senior lead officer, the sergeant, and the captain to address some of the issues that you may have. But I think in the grand scheme of things, when you want to change policy, you want to work with policy, there are 2 big decision makers that you need to address. The first one we already mentioned, which is the police commissioners, and the second one is Los Angeles City Council. So I work for Councilmember Harris-Dawson from Council District 8. As we've mentioned throughout this presentation, we have worked with community groups in the coalition, or the different coalitions that are working to reimagine public safety, to address those directly in the policy aspect. And I think on the ground, we work also with community members and stakeholders to address their issues. But you want to address city council, you want to address council members as well when you want to see policy change within the public safety world. And then the final point that I want to make, and again, you know, being a rep for a South LA council office, you get to work with folks that could be my grandparents. And I've learned so much from the grandparents in South Central because they've been through a lot and they're very capable and they're extremely agile. But something that I think is really important about South Central grandparents, because they're the fabric that holds us together, is really how they create community. And that's, I think, the essential part of change and policy change. Folks created block clubs. They created neighborhood groups for their own safety and to improve their neighborhoods. And those block clubs have sustained for over 25 years, 30 years. And, you know, a lot of change comes about those block clubs, and they bring the folks that are running for office, and they bring the captains, they bring everybody, and they keep them accountable. They bring us on a monthly basis, and they keep us accountable. And that's something that I think our generation needs to really hold on to. We need to learn how to create community immediately in our neighborhood, right? Like, I feel like younger people are good at creating community according to the things that they like. You like basketball, I like basketball, boom, we're friends. We need to create community because we live next to each other, and we want to see our community change, and we want to see our community improve. And that's, I think it's important. So the last point that I want to make when it comes to how to address these issues is really organizing. It's creating community, is coming together, and as a community, addressing those issues together in synergy. So together, we speak to the police commissioners, together we speak to the city council, together we speak to the captains, sergeants, senior lead officers, and together we are going to ask for this change. We're going to see what other organizations can help us. And I think really that's the most important point out of the other points that I've mentioned. So with that, I think I'm running out of time, but I will take any questions. I hope that was helpful. It's really basic, but I really think it's essential. We need to know how to address our folks and how to speak to power. So I will take any questions.
Do you work for Karen Bass?
No, I do not. I work for the Councilmember Harris-Dawson, Los Angeles City Council. But our office works closely with Karen Bass's office as well.
Thank you. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you explained some of these steps to organizing, you know, how we should address some of these things. What's your experience working with, how do I say this, traditional Latino community that is very set on not, you know, I don't know how to describe this, but just set in their own ways. And it's very like, you know, how do you bring about this change in community that doesn't want any change? I mean, not want any change, but doesn't know how to bring about the change. I don't know if I'm explaining myself adequately.
Yeah, I'm getting your question. So there's a group down here by my house. It's mainly Latino because the demographics in that neighborhood is entirely Latino. And yes, it is harder, I think, for Latinos to engage civically, especially when it comes to public safety, because there's an element of fear when it comes to like just being in this country and not wanting to engage public, just police because you might get deported, and there's a history of that. So what I've seen be successful is really just face-to-face interactions. So what this group does is that they do cleanups. They will pick a Saturday and they will do a community cleanup. And at every house that they clean, they stop, they drop a flyer, and they say, we meet every other Tuesday at 6 p.m. at the park. We have coffee, we have pan dulce, we have chocolate, come through. And then they come. And that's how they engage with people. They have flyers, they bring them out, they put together events, but they really engage face to face. So I wouldn't suggest, doing a social media flyer and then putting it on Facebook or Instagram and expect people to come. You have to just engage them directly. We're cleaning the gutter in front of your house. We do this on a monthly basis. We give out bread and we talk about the issues. We have police officers, city council comes, and so forth and so on. But it's a very, very hands-on work, especially with first-generation Latinos.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
There was a question regarding the traffic stops. So I know Gilbert answered. I think from our office perspective, my boss, the council member, is on record wanting to, and there was a motion, I believe, that was introduced, wanting to see an alternative to traffic stops being done by LAPD and possibly having another entity do traffic stops. And the reason being is if somebody, rolls through a stop sign, we're thinking, do we need an armed officer to make that traffic stop? Or can we have another level of professional doing that sort of stop? And that's something that we're in dialogue right now. There are folks that definitely believe that unless you have a gun, people won't respect you. I think in other countries that's not true. I think in other places, in cities, that's not true. But we're looking at that as an alternative, as a possibility for change.
Thank you.
I do have a maybe question or comment. Do you guys do anything else about educating the public about how to deal with the police? Because constantly you see these things getting escalated because the person on the receiving end gets really irritated and then the thing just gets out of control.
I think it really depends on the situation. We have worked with organizations that do teach on your rights as an individual when interacting with an officer. I think that will be my answer. You have rights as an individual, and those rights need to be respected regardless. And I think there is a lot of miscommunication when those stops or those interactions get escalated. But yeah, we do work with organizations to help us work with our constituents in knowing their rights.
We have a couple more
Okay.
minutes. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nisha.
Oh no, I was just gonna ask. So maybe I'll be on to Gilbert. Like, as far as when it comes to like community policing, or like, how do we go about community members? How do we go about like addressing these issues, such as liquor stores and the motels and all that? Because I know that that's the issue that we do have. Like, a lot of liquor stores and a lot of community like programs that for the children go to. So that just, I mean, those are some of the things that I'm very passionate about, like trying to address those issues. Like, I mean, do we reach out to the community liaison, or do we reach out to the coalition? Right.
So Gilbert, let me start, and then maybe you can finish it off, because I know Community Coalition has a lot of history with liquor stores. I will tell you from the technical aspect of the work that we do as a council office. We have what we call a nuisance abatement team that it's comprised of a planning department individual, building and safety inspector, and an LAPD detective. And we go to these liquor stores. We run the numbers around crime in the that are fostered by that location, and then we organize folks to come out to the public hearing and speak on that particular liquor store, and with the hopes that we can revoke their license and we can get a different type of business, or put conditions on that location so that it can mitigate the problems that we're seeing. So we have worked with Community Coalition to do this, and we have our office. We have done so many liquor stores, and we have worked with the county on Monarch Liquor, Tams, even another liquor store on Florence. We have done off of 39th and Western. We have done several liquor stores, but this is a partnership. And we do work with LAPD with that. They provide the crime report, and they help us get to that point, along with the planning department, who helps us with all the paperwork and gets us the hearing there. But the most important piece is really just having the community support. So Gilbert, you want to speak a little bit more on how you go, your organization goes about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And great question. I mean, the campaign that really put Community Coalition on the map right after the 1992 civil unrest was the Rebuild South LA Without Liquor Stores campaign. And through that grassroots community organizing, through doing a community-wide surveying process where we just got out there, well, not me, but back in the day, the OG COCO members got out in the streets, knocked on doors, and asked those tough questions about safety in the community. And the community identified liquor stores as the #1 nuisance or problematic business in the community. So, Karen Bass and a lot of the leaders that were working with COCO at that time got together, and just like Albie said, started engaging local policymakers, decision makers, created legislation, showed up at countless hearings, like numerous hearings, met with the alcohol beverage control folks. And I mean, it was tedious work, but through that work, they were able to get 150 liquor stores, stop 150 liquor stores from being rebuilt that were burnt down during the 92 unrest. And so basically just what they did back in the early 90s is still work that we're doing to this day. And so like just earlier this year, by using, it's what we call the inside outside strategy. So we have players on the inside in the system, like Maruqeece Harris-Dawson, like Herb Wesson, like Mark Ridley Thomas, and we do the work on the outside to build the grassroots collective voice consensus, right? To push the decision makers on the inside. And just earlier this year, a great example, though it took like 15 years or some odd years, we did take the liquor store license from a very problematic liquor store right off of Vermont and 80th Monarch Liquor, somewhere around there, right up the street from COCO. And so it shows like just making sure that the community is not only leading it, but also developing it, planning you know, and really involved and has a seat at the table in all these different decision-making processes is important. And Coco has been doing that for 30 years. So that's why I encourage, again, you know, getting involved and because that's how we create change. We don't expect anyone to come in and fix everything overnight. Any progress that we've made has come through people power. And so, yeah.
And if you want to talk about, you know, disinvestment and planning, or like disinvestment and racism, like whose grand idea was to give out that many liquor licenses, you know, to like an area like that? That was not a good idea. And today, 25 years later, we're still like, we have 5 liquor stores in the queue, and that's going to take time because we have to build each case. But we're still working the bad decisions that were allowed 25 years ago. So that's another layer of racism that South LA has really experienced, not through necessarily force, but through lack of planning.
Yeah, I agree, and thank you, Albie and Gilbert. But I just want to also add that, like, I'm thankful for you guys because, like, especially because down on Fig and like 60th or 60, like close to 70th, there was a liquor store right there, and including the liquor store that's on Florence that you guys mentioned in Fig, I think, or I don't know, but I know the one that's like close to 70th and Fig, it got closed down or something happened to it, so it was a lot of traffic going in and out of there. Especially with the, you know, it was a lot of traffic going in. We'll just say that. But yeah, so
that one was closed because of the prostitution activity there.
Yeah, that's what I.
It's all good. You have to call it out. That's what happened. I was in that hearing. Yes.
Yeah, because of prostitution. So like it was a lot of traffic going in and out of there. So yeah, thank you for that.
And to the other question on the unions, I will say that just thinking like 6 years ago, nobody was talking about the district attorney here in LA or really across the nation. It wasn't in the spotlight. And so I think as you see protests and, you know, Black Lives Matter and Build Power and all these different organizations really elevating the issues in our community, now more and more people are looking at the unions. And so I've lifted that in several spaces, like the police continue to function much because of, one, the Bill of Rights, but also the unions that they're backed by. And so there's like efforts to make sure that elected officials aren't receiving funding from police unions, right? Like Herb Wesson he rescinded his endorsement of Jackie Lacey, but he also stopped receiving money from police unions, right? I don't think Maruqeece receives any money or has ever received any money from police unions. And so because they are such a well-oiled and functioning machine and have all these legislators and politicians in their back pocket, it is hard to, it is hard to reform or transform or dismantle the police unions, but now it's more at the forefront and more people are talking about it. So again, that Bill of Rights work will have a direct impact on the police unions. But yeah, that's a tough one. It's a tough one. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much, Gilbert and Albie. I just want to say on behalf of LA Works, it's a pleasure to have you two come in today speaking to us and just to see how we can make changes in the community locally, just speak out to our local police departments. I also want to thank the volunteers for coming out today just to see what we can all do to change our community. I also tell our friends and neighbors how we can do to make impact on our community and change the things that we don't like. I also want to let you all know that this is recorded, so if you want to go back and refer to some of the things that Albie mentioned and some of the things that Gilbert mentioned during their presentation and during the workshop, you can. I will be sending out a follow-up email so that if you guys have any questions, you guys can send an email back. Just ask me anything. And it was a pleasure to have you all today. If you don't have any questions, just send me an email or don't feel afraid to reach out to us.
And does anyone have any? Oh, sorry. I keep doing that, Nisha. Sorry. I was just gonna say, like in the last couple minutes we have, does anyone have any concluding comments or questions for us or for Albie or for Gil?
I'll just say quickly, for the lady that asked the question about the Know Your Rights, that is something that Coco has had an eye on. So I just posted a link to a big Know Your Rights workshop we did a few months ago with the Langston Bar Association and a bunch of folks. You know, yeah, so it's really informative, and so you could check that out. Definitely share it. That political education is key, especially right now, this current moment. So.
Yeah, huge thank you to both of our guest speakers today. You guys were both incredible, and I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to learn more from you. If you are just joining us for the first time this week, you may not know that we do a group photo at the end of every session to commemorate the time that we spent together. So I encourage you all to turn on your cameras so we can capture your beauty. And one sec, let me get this ready.
And I'm with LA Works, guys, and I just want to say, although Marissa and Nisha run this whole thing, I just want to say a huge thank you to all you guys who've shown up. There's several of your names and your faces that I've seen at just about, at several of these. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, because a lot of people talk about making a change in the world, but they don't, they can't even share a few hours of their afternoon to educate themselves on this. So I just want to say thank you for being amazing people, and for just reviving my faith in humanity right now. Because I don't know about you guys, a lot of challenging stuff going on in our society, between our awareness of all of the injustices that our Black brothers and sisters face, between, a lot of the political strife that we're feeling around the election, stuff like that. It's kind of a rough time. So it's really, really heartening to me to see all of you guys coming together to do the necessary work to make positive change. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you, each and every one of you.
Yeah, definitely want to echo that. It's been such a pleasure getting to work with you all and getting to know you all over these past few weeks. And I'm so sad that this is the last of our series, because it's been such a pleasure. And I really hope that you all learned a lot and that you are taking a lot away from these workshops. So without further ado, put on your best pose, your duck face, your peace signs, and we're going to take our group photo in 3, 2, 1. Yay! So awesome. Thank you all again so much for joining us.
Remember to vote. Remember to vote.
Remember to vote. Yes, please vote.
Yes.
Please vote.
If you can vote, please vote.
Yes. Keep in mind all of the things that we have learned together. And I hope to see you all again at a future LA Works project. Again, it's been such a pleasure, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Bye, everyone.